My God, you're like a ghost. The only difference is that we buried that ghost 25 years ago in frozen ground. The sky spread a leaden blanket over O'Hare Airport, lightning flashing as if to illuminate this city's dirty conscience. In that moment, I looked in the rearview mirror in the dead white light. What I saw wasn't just the passenger sitting behind me. It was my own reflection, horrified, bearing the years and pain in the lines on my face. The shrunken man in the expensive camel hair coat was sunk into the leather seat as if surrendering his soul. His eyes were locked directly on mine, whispering that deadly sentence like a prayer. The rhythmic squeak of the wipers wasn't scraping the rain off the glass, but rather the life I was barely holding on to. At that moment, I felt the ground beneath me shifting and pulling me toward that black abyss I had been running from for years. My name is Caleb. Just Caleb. No middle name, no last name, because I don't remember. The surname Voss on my driver's license was slapped on me 25 years ago in that damn hospital room like a gray pajama handed out by the state. I've been living in this metal box for 3 months. My home is a junk sedan with 300,000 miles on it, its gauges flickering, its interior reeking of stale gasoline and the sour smell of my unwashed body. My left leg, that damn left leg aches in humid weather, as if a rusty nail were turning inside the bone. My bathroom is the neon-lit, urine-smelling toilets at gas stations. If I'm lucky, and my leg is strong enough to carry me that day, I can get under a shower with water that never gets warm at one of the cheap motels by the highway. I am this city's ghost. I am invisible. People don't look at my crippled leg, my cane, or my weary face. They pass right through me. This concrete jungle doesn't even hear the sound it makes as it chews up, grinds down, and spits out people like me. Yet just 6 months ago, I was someone. I had a life so orderly it was enviable in any frame. A warm, mortgage-paid home, my wife Elena who made the world's most beautiful cherry pie, and my 2 miracles whose pictures covered our refrigerator. 9-year-old Leo and 7-year-old Maya. I ran a boutique construction company called Solid Foundations. My hands were calloused but clean. We built wooden houses and sturdy porches. Despite my limp, I was always at the forefront of the construction site. I would toss my cane aside, ignore the pain, and work shoulder to shoulder with my workers. I wasn't rich, but I was honorable. I thought that paper castle would last forever, but life likes to strike at your weakest link. Mine collapsed in just 2 weeks, leaving me buried under the rubble. First, that big contract, that damn project in the north of the city. The main contractor, that man in his shiny suit with teeth too white, drove the stake through our hearts. I had buried all my capital, my children's future, there. Materials on credit, hopes on credit. My men worked 7 days a week, rain or shine. Then one morning, we saw the site gate locked. Those shell companies had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only millions of dollars in debt and unpaid bills. I struggled. I sold Elena's car, took out loans from loan shark-like banks to pay the wages of the craftsmen I'd known for years. But the swamp pulls you in deeper the more you struggle. When the banks came knocking, when the bailiff slapped a seizure notice on the television in our living room, everything spiraled out of control. Elena was the first to break. "How could you do this to us, Caleb?" she screamed. Her voice was sharp and shattering, like a glass vase smashing against the wall. She was hurriedly stuffing clothes into a suitcase in the bedroom. Her face, which always looked so kind, was now unrecognizable with fear and anger. "You burned our future for nothing. You tried to be a hero with your crippled leg, but you left us homeless. I tried to explain to her. The market conditions, those men's escape, that it wasn't my fault. But a mother, when the roof over her children's heads is in danger, doesn't listen to reason. She only acts on instinct. I'm going to my mother's, she said, zipping up Maya's coat. Leo wasn't looking at me, just clutching his toy car to his chest. Until you pull yourself together. Don't call us. The door slammed in my face. That lock click echoed inside my ribcage and never stopped. Homelessness is not a sudden darkness that descends upon you. It is like a creeping dampness that slowly seeps into your bones. In the early days, I tried to hold on in a cheap boarding house on the south side of the city, where the walls reeked of mold and the fights in the next room never ended. But the city shows no mercy to a 42-year-old man who is bankrupt, has a ruined credit rating, and cannot climb construction scaffolding with his lame leg. In my job applications, I saw the same expression in every employer's eyes when they saw the distinct, rhythmic shuffle of my left leg. A refusal mixed with pity. "We'll call you," they said. They didn't call. When the money ran out, I fell onto the street, along with my dignity. That's when, in a last desperate attempt, I got into this old sedan through a shady dealership's rent-to-own scheme. The taxi company swallows the lion's share of the earnings. The app commission skins us alive, and I struggle to survive on the crumbs that remain. Filling the tank halfway, fooling my stomach with a stale sandwich, and sending Elena that alimony check at the start of every month. That alimony receipt is the only proof I have left that I'm still a father, that I'm still breathing. I'm willing to starve and freeze to send that piece of paper. But living in a car, especially with a damaged body like mine, is a nightly torture session. No matter how far back I recline the driver's seat, my left leg never relaxes. That old metal plate in my kneecap draws the cold like a magnet on winter nights, driving it straight into my bone marrow. Every 2 hours at night, I have to start the engine and turn on the heater. That damn math between burning gas and freezing. In the summer, the humidity is like a wet blanket clinging to my lungs. In the darkest corners of mall parking lots, I pull my jacket over my head to avoid the security guards' flashlights and steal 15 minutes of sleep. I hide not so people won't see me, but so I won't see their judgmental stares. Over time, I became a fleshy, bony extension of the steering wheel. I became a flaw in the fabric of the city, a faint stain. Passengers would get in, bury themselves in the blue light of their phones, mumble, "Take me to the square," or "North Side," and wouldn't even look at my face when they got out. They ignored the faint groan my crippled leg made as it pressed the pedals. To them, I wasn't a person, just a mechanical necessity to take them from point A to point B. A ghost. But that morning when I met Adrian, there was a different, ominous electricity in the air. Since 4 in the morning, I had been waiting in the O'Hare Airport waiting area, engine off, waiting for my turn. The sky seemed pierced. Rain was vomiting all the rust and grime of the Midwest onto the asphalt, turning the roads into a black mirror. There were no customers, just the rhythmic sound of the windshield wipers and the distant roar of departing planes. With a cup of cold coffee that tasted like burnt plastic in my hand, I watched those metal birds cutting through the clouds. Each one was going somewhere, to their homes, to their loved ones. And I was just here. My mind was on Leo's upcoming birthday. He would be 9 next week. With a crumpled $30 in my pocket and a quarter tank of gas, what could I give my son? Nothing. A big, crippling nothing. My phone screen suddenly lit up. that shrill notification sound cutting through the silence like a knife. Comfort plus call. I flinched. A trip to one of those glass towers in the city center, a luxury plaza. Usually the people there rode in shiny black SUVs, not beat-up cars like mine. They wanted business class. My trusty old car with its worn-out seat upholstery only barely qualified for the comfort class in the app's algorithms because I obsessively kept the interior spotless. Maybe there were no other cars around. Maybe fate was weaving its web. I pressed the accept button. My finger was trembling. As I drove toward the arrivals terminal, I felt a sharp pain in my left leg. That familiar pain that told me, "You're done for, Caleb," every time I pressed the clutch. Amidst the chaos in front of the terminal, I immediately noticed the man standing under the awning. He was in his early 40s, someone who commanded the air around him with his very posture. The camel hair coat he wore was probably more expensive than my car. A leather briefcase in his hand, a watch worth a fortune on his wrist. But beyond this wealth, there was a strange tension in his stance. He kept glancing at his watch, frowning, as if engaged in an invisible battle with time. I pulled up to the curb. The rain drummed loudly against the windshield. The man closed his wet umbrella with a professional flourish and opened the back door. The moment he got in, the stale, cheap smell of the car suddenly changed. It gave way to an expensive perfume, damp wool, and an inexplicable scent of anxiety. "Good morning," I said, careful not to let my voice tremble. I hadn't dared look at him in the rearview mirror yet. "One Prudential Plaza," he said. His voice had that metallic tone of people accustomed to giving orders, but beneath it lay a crack, an urgency. He hadn't lifted his head from his smartphone. His fingers were moving quickly across the screen. "And please, hurry if you can. I'm about to be late for the most important meeting of my life." I shook my head slightly. "Traffic is heavy, but I'll do my best, sir," I said. I shifted my weight onto my left leg to put the car in first gear, clenching my teeth. The car jerked forward and turned onto the ramp leading to the highway. The rain was heavier now. It was like a curtain that separated us from the outside world, from that gray reality, and trapped us inside this small metal capsule. I turned my eyes to the rearview mirror to check the road and change lanes. And then the moment. That moment was when the universe held its breath. Adrian lifted his head from the phone. His gaze met mine in the mirror. Time stopped, not just as a metaphor, but as a physical reality. I saw his pupils dilate like a camera diaphragm. The blood drained from his face in seconds, replaced by an ashen pallor. His hands trembled. That expensive phone slipped from his fingers and fell onto the carpet. A solid thud. But another sound drowned it out. Oh my God. It wasn't a scream. It was a whisper, but it contained such intense, such pure pain that a chill ran down my spine. It was as if someone had been stabbed in the back seat. "Are you okay, sir?" I tried to maintain a professional tone, but the dryness in my throat gave me away. I signaled to move into the right lane. "If you're feeling sick, I can pull over. There's water in the trunk." He didn't answer. Instead, he lunged forward with a sudden, jerky movement. His hands, clad in expensive leather gloves, gripped the headrest of my seat so tightly that I could see the knuckles turn white in the rearview mirror. His breath was on my neck, short, irregular, and laden with fear. His gaze, that gaze seemed to peel back my skin and try to count the bones beneath. His eyes roamed over every inch of my face, the lines on my forehead, my jaw, which I was trying to keep stiff despite my crippled leg and that old scar on my left cheek. "It can't be." His voice trembled like the shrill sound of breaking glass. "This is impossible. Please, turn around. Stop the car and turn to me." Panic knotted in my stomach like a cold fist. Who was this man? A vagrant? Or a ghost come to collect the price of a mistake I'd made in the past? An unpaid debt? Maybe he was just a rich addict who'd lost his mind. But the pure, unadulterated terror in his voice compelled me to obey. I hit the brakes. I steered the car onto the shoulder of the highway, which twisted like a wet snake in the rain toward the muddy embankment. The wheels screeched over the gravel as my left leg trembled on the clutch pedal, both from pain and fear. I stopped the car and turned off the ignition, but I didn't take my hands off the steering wheel. I was tense like an animal ready to defend itself. Slowly, as far as my body would allow, I turned around. "Look, sir," I said, trying to make my voice firm. "If there's a problem, I can call another car. I'm just doing my job. If you don't want to go..." "What's your name?" He cut me off like a knife. The question wasn't curiosity, it was interrogation. It was a challenge. "Caleb," I said cautiously. I didn't take my eyes off him. "My last name is Voss, Caleb Voss. Now, are you going to tell me what's going on, or should I call the police?" Adrian, that's what his name said on the app screen, slumped back into his chair. He covered his eyes with his hands. His chest rose and fell rapidly, as if his lungs weren't getting enough air. Inside his expensive coat, he had shrunk into a defenseless child. "Voss? No, that's not the name. It's definitely not." When he pulled his hands away from his face, I saw his eyes were filled with tears. The gray, steel-eyed businessman was gone, replaced by a broken wreck. You look exactly like my brother. God, you're a living copy of my father in his youth." I let out a nervous laugh, but my voice came out metallic and cold. "It happens. They say people resemble each other. You can find hundreds like me in Chicago, tired, broken, and bankrupt." "No!" he shouted. His voice echoed in the small cabin of the car. "Shut up. This isn't just a coincidence. This isn't a statistical error. This is either a miracle or a curse." His trembling hand reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. For a moment, I thought he was going to pull out a gun, and I grabbed the door handle. But what he pulled out was an old leather wallet. From it, he took out a black and white photograph, its corners worn and yellowed. "Look," he said, holding the photo out to me. "Just look." Hesitantly, I reached out and took the photo. That little piece of paper between my fingers felt electrified. In the photo, two children stood on a pier in front of an old lake house. The older one, perhaps 16 or 17, smiled proudly, a guitar in his hand. The younger one clung to his leg, looking up at his brother with admiration. I focused on the older boy's face, and in that moment, the noise of the highway, the sound of the rain, everything faded away. Only that faint ringing in my ears remained. The boy's smile, the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, even the slight slump of his shoulders. It wasn't like looking at a stranger. It was like looking into a mirror from 25 years ago. "Where?" My voice cracked. My throat was dry. "Where did you find this photo? Is it a montage?" "This isn't your photo, Caleb," Adrian said softly. His voice was calmer now, but filled with a sharper pain. "This is me and my brother Julian, summer of 1999, that lake house in Wisconsin." The world shifted on its axis. The car suddenly felt smaller, and I couldn't breathe. "Impossible," I whispered. You said your brother was dead. You just said that." "Then we buried the wrong man," Adrian said. His voice was cold, each syllable deliberate. He fixed his eyes on mine. "Julian disappeared 25 years ago when he was 17. He left home after an argument and never returned. The police, psychics, private investigators, we searched for years. And then, 6 months later, they said they found a body in the woods. It was too badly damaged to be identified. But the clothes matched. The height matched. They closed the case. My father passed away that day, and his body followed a few years later. But I always felt that coffin was empty." Suddenly he leaned forward and grabbed my wrist. His touch was warm and damp. Julian had a crescent-shaped birthmark on his left shoulder, right above his collarbone. My mother called it the moon's kiss. I froze. That mark on my left shoulder. The mark I'd seen in the mirror for years, not knowing what it meant, thinking it was just one of the countless flaws on my body. I unconsciously brought my hand to my shoulder. "Show me," Adrian said. It wasn't a request. It was a plea. With trembling fingers, I pulled aside the collar of my cheap synthetic sweater. Adrian leaned in, his eyes fixed on that spot. And I heard him hold his breath. "Hilal," he whispered. A single tear fell from his eye onto the lapel of his expensive coat. "Oh my God, it's you, Julian. It's you." On the side of the O'Hare Highway, inside an old car swaying in the wind created by passing trucks, two strangers looked at each other and cried. One was a wealthy businessman who had found the piece he had been searching for years. The other was a taxi driver who didn't even know who he was, a man who had been beaten down by life. "I looked for you," said Adrian, his voice breaking with sobs. "I looked for you even when everyone said I was crazy. I looked for you even when my wife left me because of this obsession." He wiped his tears with the back of his hand and suddenly switched back to businessman mode. But this time there was a wild hope in his eyes. "We're going. To hell with the meeting. We're going to a clinic right now. We're going to do a DNA test. I need to prove this with science." "I don't have money for a DNA test," I said automatically. That poverty reflex, honed over the years, kicked in even in that moment of shock. "I have $30 in my pocket. And if I don't pay for this car today—" "Money?" Adrian let out a bitter laugh. "Money doesn't matter to me. I'll give up everything I own. We have the money, brother. Let's go." I gripped the gear shift. The trembling in my hands was uncontrollable, like that of an elderly Parkinson's patient. But deep within my mind, amidst the chaos, a strange, icy calm had settled. A piece that had been missing from my soul for 25 years had fallen into place like a rusty key fitting into a lock. Ignoring the pain in my left leg, I pressed the clutch and turned the steering wheel sharply to the left. As I made that forbidden U-turn in the middle of the highway, the horns blaring behind me didn't even register. The city, wet asphalt, and a vast unknown stretched out before me. But for the first time in 3 months, maybe even 25 years, I wasn't going nowhere. I was driving toward a possibility. By the time we reached the private medical center on Dearborn Street, the rain had stopped, replaced by Chicago's famously bone-chilling wind. Adrian was silent the whole way. It wasn't the awkward silence of two strangers, but a heavy silence like the countdown to an exploding bomb. I parked the car not in the valet area of that luxurious glass building, but in a dark back alley 2 blocks away. I didn't have the strength to endure the valet's condescending glances. I retrieved my cane from the back seat and performed the familiar, painful ritual of getting out of the car. First the good leg, then a deep breath, and finally dragging the crippled leg out. The clinic reeked of money and sterility. The moment we entered, the automatic glass doors closed behind us, and the noise of the streets faded away. The floors were so shiny that the mud on the soles of my shoes left an embarrassing mark with every step. The young woman at the reception desk couldn't hide the shock in her eyes when she looked up from her computer. Adrian stood beside me in his razor-sharp suit. On the other side was me, a street bum limping along in an oil-stained jacket, worn-out jeans, and hair that hadn't been washed in days. "We need an urgent DNA test," Adrian said. His voice was as clear as it would be at a board meeting, but I could see his knuckles turn white as he gripped the edge of the counter. "Full sibling panel, the fastest one." The woman looked hesitantly at me, then at Adrian. "Of course, Mr. Vance. Your IDs, please." I pulled my driver's license from my wallet. The plastic coating was peeling at the corners. Caleb Voss. Adrian placed my shabby ID next to his platinum card. Adrian Julian Vance. Even with our names side by side, the chasm between us was so vast. The sample collection room was as white as an operating room. As the nurse swabbed the inside of my cheek, I felt a strange sense of surrender. It wasn't just a piece of tissue from my mouth I was leaving on that cotton swab, but a piece of my tired, broken life. I could feel Adrian's gaze on me. He wasn't looking at me like a lab rat, but like a lost treasure. And that gaze felt heavier than any pained look. "The results will be in your email within 72 hours, said the official. When we stepped outside, the sky was beginning to darken. The wind seeped through the tears in my jacket, biting into my sweaty skin. I started to shiver. It wasn't just the cold. It was the emptiness that came with the adrenaline wearing off. "Where are you staying?" Adrian asked, seeing me struggling to stand, leaning on my cane. "In the car," I said. My voice was lost in the wind. I averted my eyes. "Sometimes in the back seat. Sometimes," Adrian swore. Not the kind of polite salon gentleman's curse. The kind I'd heard on construction sites, a guttural, angry curse. "This won't do, it's over. Those days are over." He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Let's go." "Where?" I resisted, clinging to the last shreds of my pride. "Look, I'm not begging. I have a job. I can take care of myself." "Be quiet, Caleb," he said. His voice was soft but uncompromising. "You're my brother. No matter what the test says, I recognize that face, that look. I'm not leaving Julian out on the street in this cold." Half an hour later, we were in front of one of the city's most luxurious hotels, the Langham. When the valet opened my door, his face cringed. The stale cigarette and damp smell inside my car had spread to the hotel's lavender-scented entrance. Adrian tossed the key to the valet. "Take good care of the car, and have the interior cleaned." My stomach clenched as the elevator ascended to the 40th floor. I saw myself in the mirrored cabin, dirty, unshaven, shoulders slumped, standing like a stain next to the smartly dressed man beside me. My breath caught when we entered the 40th floor suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows laid Chicago at my feet. The city sparkled with thousands of lights. Down below, in those dark streets, Caleb was freezing. But here it was warm and safe. Yet I felt like a thief. I didn't belong here. I was afraid to step on that pure white carpet with my muddy boots. The shower's over there, Adrian said, pointing to the bathroom. He had noticed my shyness, my inability to even sit on the couch. You go in. I'll ask the front desk for some clothes that fit you. What's your size? 42. Long, I stammered. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. It was bigger than my car. Marble floor, heated towel racks. I looked at myself in the mirror. The dark circles under my eyes, the dirt on my cheeks, the ugly scars from the surgery on my crippled leg. I took off my clothes. With each piece that fell to the floor, I felt like I was shedding a layer of filth. I turned on the hot water. Steam filled the room. When I stepped under the water, the chronic pain in my leg eased a little. I watched the dirty water flow down the drain at my feet. Black, gray water. Not just the city's grime. Fear, shame, helplessness, and loneliness flowed away with it too. I leaned my head against the marble wall and for the first time in 25 years, cried silently, overcome by the uncontrollable feeling of finally being safe. When I came out of the bathroom, clean clothes were waiting for me on the bed. Soft, dark blue jeans and a gray cashmere sweater. Simple, but better quality than anything I'd worn in 3 months. Putting them on, I felt alienated from my own body. The man in the mirror was clean, but the timid, stray dog look in his eyes was still there. My left leg, though slightly loosened by the warm water, continued to remind me of itself with every step. When I entered the room, Adrian was sitting in the armchair by the window, idly twirling the crystal glass in his hand. The city flowed silently below. Dinner service will be here shortly, he said, without looking at me. Then he turned his head and looked me over. A momentary relief flashed in his eyes, followed by deep sadness. You look better. Please sit down. Your leg, would you like to stretch it out? I sat down in the chair opposite him, but hesitated to stretch out my leg. I didn't want to contaminate those expensive fabrics, that sterile order, with my disability. I'm fine, I said in a low voice. Tell me, said Adrian. His voice was soft, but there was a hunger in it that had built up over the years. Tell me everything. How you survived, where you came from. And I told him. Not the polished, sanitized story I'd told for years on job applications, to social workers, or to Elena. I told him the raw, bloody, true story. Gary, Indiana, I began, fixing my gaze on the pattern of the carpet. 25 years ago, I woke up in the intensive care unit of the state hospital, an unnamed trauma case. There was a drum pounding inside my head, and a huge, dark void where my memory should have been. I didn't know who I was or how I got there. The police came, took my fingerprints, ran their databases. Nothing. It was as if I had fallen from the sky. I took a deep breath. The helplessness of those days still choked me. They named me Caleb because it appeared in the Bible passage the nurse who found me was reading that day. The hospital social worker gave me my last name, Voss. It means fox in German. You'll have to be cunning to survive, son. You have no one, she said. Adrian's face was in shadow, but I could see his hands gripping the armrests. Then the state's awful group homes. They wouldn't call them orphanages. They looked at my bone age and said I was 17. I was the oldest kid there, but I was weak. I had no memory. I had to learn to protect myself. Then construction work. My leg was better then, just a slight ache. I worked like crazy. I thought that if I built houses for others, maybe I'd have a house of my own, a past. And I did. Elena, the kids, the company, but my foundation was rotten, Adrian. A man without a past has a future hanging by a thread. My story was over when room service knocked on the door. The waiter quietly set down the silver-lidded plates and slipped away like a ghost. The food was amazing, grilled salmon, steamed vegetables, but I couldn't swallow. "Now it's my turn," said Adrian, pushing his plate aside. He stood up and walked to the window. His silhouette blended into the night lights of Chicago. "Our father, Jonathan Vance. He was an aircraft engineer, a quiet man, obsessed with details. Our mother, Sarah, she was the heart of the home. She was a music teacher." Adrian turned to me. "You, Julian. You were the joy of the home. You were my hero. I was the quiet, bespectacled child hiding among the books. You were the charismatic older brother ready to conquer the world with your guitar. You always protected me. I remember you chasing the kids who teased me at school all the way to the highway." I closed my eyes. I forced myself. I searched for a spark in those dark corners of my mind. But there was nothing. Only emptiness. "October 4th, 2000, Adrian said, his voice trembling. "You had a fight with my dad. Whatever the reason was, it seems so insignificant now. You slammed the door. 'I'm never coming back,' you yelled. And you didn't." He swallowed. "We searched for months. My mother aged 10 years in a month. My father shut himself in his workshop in the garage. And 6 months later, they found the body. In the woods, unrecognizable. The jacket was the same. The height was the same. DNA technology wasn't that widespread back then. They only looked at dental records and physical characteristics. The police wanted to close the case. My father couldn't bear the uncertainty anymore. We buried him. I mean, you." Silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket. Only the hum of the air conditioner could be heard. Every detail Adrian recounted bounced off the concrete wall in my mind. Until that sentence. "My mother never touched her piano again after that day," Adrian said softly. "She used to fill the house with music, especially on winter evenings." A string inside me trembled. A tiny crack appeared in the concrete wall in my mind. A scent. Cinnamon and old wood. And a voice. "Beethoven," I whispered involuntarily. My voice didn't seem to belong to me. Adrian froze. "What?" I squeezed my eyes shut. The image was blurry, but the sound was clear. Slender fingers pressing the keys of an old, slightly out-of-tune piano. Outside, snow was falling heavily. "Moonlight Sonata," I said. My mother. When it snowed outside, she would light the fireplace and always play the first movement of Moonlight Sonata. She never played the third movement. She said it was too violent. There was a crash. Adrian had dropped his glass. The water spilled onto that expensive carpet, but he didn't care. He looked at me like I was a ghost, with horror and hope. "Yes." His voice was hoarse, trying to hold back his sobs. "Yes, she never played the third movement. My father loved it, but she wouldn't play it." He came to my side and knelt before me. That proud businessman had become the little boy crying at his brother's feet. He took my hand. "You remember," he said. "God, you're there. You're still there under that rubble." In that moment, my 25 years of loneliness cracked. A tear rolled down my cheek and burned the scar on my cheek. "Tomorrow," Adrian said, pulling himself together. He stood up, wiped his face. The helpless search was gone from his eyes. There was a fire of vengeance. Tomorrow, we go to Detective Shaw. The detective? I asked, dazed. I got hold of her 6 months ago when I saw you in my dream. She's a former homicide detective, a stubborn woman. If anyone can find out about that accident, who hit you that night and threw you like trash on the side of the road, it's her. I turned to the window and looked at my reflection. There, in the window of that luxurious room, I no longer saw just a crippled taxi driver. I saw the owner of an unaccounted-for life, a stolen past. Let's find her, I said, surprised by the harshness in my own voice. Whoever did this to me, let's find her, Adrian. We will, brother, said Adrian. Sleep now. Tomorrow will be a long day. That night, lying between the starched sheets, sleep wouldn't come. I watched the city lights. I thought of Leo and Maya, sleeping in Elena's mother's house in the suburbs. Maybe soon I could bring them not just their bankrupt father, but a hero who had reclaimed his stolen life. Those 3 days in the hotel room felt longer than a lifetime. Time crawled by, as painful as it had been during the worst days of my crippled leg. Adrian was handling his business outside but leaving me trapped inside this glass bubble. You need to rest, he had said. Shake off 25 years of weariness. But how can one rest when all reality is unraveling like a thread? That leather chair in front of the panoramic window on the 40th floor was my new prison. For hours I watched below, the river of lights on the highway. Down there, among thousands of cars, was my old faithful Civic. A small yellow dot waiting in a dark corner of the parking lot, permeated with the smell of poverty. Looking at it made my stomach clench. The idea of going back to that car felt both frightening and strangely safe. Because I knew that misery. I didn't know this luxury, this expectation, this possibility of brotherhood. I felt like a con artist. What if the test came back negative? What if I was no different from a thief stealing Adrian's hopes? Adrian came in the evenings. He brought takeout from the city's most expensive restaurants, truffle pasta, drinks I couldn't pronounce. We sat across from each other and ate in silence. Then he would start. Words poured from his mouth like a river, as if he feared I would disappear the moment he stopped talking. Do you remember that summer at the lake house? He asked on the second night. Outside, the wind was beating against the windows. My dad had bought us an old motorboat. The engine was always breaking down. I closed my eyes. I tried hard. Nothing. Just black, a bottomless pit. I don't remember, Adrian, I said, unable to hide the guilt in my voice. I'm sorry. I'm trying, but nothing. Adrian's shoulders slumped, but he didn't give up. What about the Atari? His eyes lit up. That first game console my dad brought home? It had one arm, a joystick. We had to share. I dropped the fork in my hand. For a moment, a spark flashed at the bottom of that black pit in my mind. A very clear, very sharp image. Gray plastic, a red button, and a crackling sound. You broke it, I said involuntarily. My voice was a whisper, but it had the impact of a bomb in the room. You got angry because you lost and threw it against the wall. Then, so my dad wouldn't get mad, we said I broke it. I took the blame. Adrian froze. The glass in his hand hung suspended in the air. His eyes widened, his breath caught. I told you about the joystick, he said slowly, but I never told you it broke, or who took the blame. The smile spreading across his face was like the sunrise. You remember. God, you really are here. On the morning of the third day, I woke up before dawn. The city was covered in a gray mist. My leg throbbed from the damp air. I got out of bed, grabbed my cane, and walked to the window. Adrian had fallen asleep on the couch. He had his phone in his hand. Suddenly, the notification sound pierced the silence. Ding. A simple, digital voice. But for me, it was either a death sentence or a certificate of salvation. Adrian woke up with a start. When our eyes met, I saw the fear in his eyes. He grabbed his phone. His fingers were shaking so much that he struggled to unlock the screen. "It's here," he said. His voice was rough, like sandpaper. "From the lab." I froze where I stood. I leaned so hard on my cane that my palm hurt. "Open it," I said. "Get it over with." Adrian touched the screen. 1 second, 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, my heart pounded against my ribcage. Then Adrian looked up. His eyes were filled with tears, but this time they weren't from pain, but from overwhelming relief. 99.99%, he whispered. His voice trembled. "A perfect sibling match. It's confirmed." He threw the phone onto the chair and walked towards me. Before I could react, he wrapped his arms around me. It wasn't a polite, distant hug. It was like someone who had been drowning clinging to a lifeguard, as if he would break my bones. "My brother," he sobbed into my shoulder. "You're my brother, Julian. You're alive." In that moment, the last wall of resistance inside me crumbled. I dropped my cane. I wrapped my arms around my brother, whom I had found after 25 years. In that luxury hotel room on the expensive carpet, 2 grown men were hugging each other and crying. One because he had found the peace he had been searching for all these years. The other because he finally knew who he was. "All right," I said after a while, patting Adrian lightly on the back. My eyes were burning. "All right. You're going to drown me." Adrian stepped back, wiped his face on his arm. He was laughing. He was laughing like crazy as tears streamed down his cheeks. "We need to drink," he said. "We need to celebrate." "It's 6 in the morning, Adrian," I said, picking up my cane from the floor. I was smiling too. The muscles in my face seemed to have forgotten how to do it. "Then coffee," he said. Then he became serious. That cheerful boy was gone, replaced by a determined businessman. "Do you know what will happen now? First, we'll have that grave opened. We'll have his name removed from that stone. Julian Vance will officially come back to life." He walked to the table and opened a file. "And the money. My mom and dad. They left us an inheritance. Apartments, accounts, insurance funds. I haven't touched it in years. Your share is sitting there with interest. I haven't touched a single penny of it, Julian. That money is yours." I shook my head. "I don't want your money." "It's not my money," he roared. "It's our money, our family's money. You'll pay off your debts with that money. You'll silence those loan sharks. You'll give Elena and the children the life they deserve." And most importantly, his gaze drifted to my cane and my left leg. "We'll take you to the best doctors in the world. Whatever it takes for that leg." "The kids," I said, not because of the money, but thinking of them made my heart ache. "Can I see them? Elena, will she accept me like this, with this story?" "She will," Adrian said firmly. "Get ready. We're going to Joliet. Right now. We're leaving taxi driver Caleb here. You're going home as Julian Vance. We stopped in front of a massive, armored-like black SUV gleaming in the dim light of the parking lot. Adrian handed me the keys, but I shook my head. I can't, I said, pointing to my cane. My left leg. I might not feel the clutch of this tank. You drive, Adrian. I just want to be a passenger today. Adrian didn't argue. When he got into the driver's seat, I sank into the passenger seat, into that soft leather. There were no jolts, engine noise, or gasoline smell like in my Civic. Only silence and safety. As we pulled onto the highway and the Chicago skyline shrank in the rearview mirror, I was fighting a strange battle inside between the broken Caleb and the newly awakened Julian. As we approached Joliet, Adrian suddenly tensed. That wooded area, he said, pointing to the dense trees on the right. His voice was ice cold. They found your jacket there, and the other man's body. Every time I looked at that place, I imagined you rotting there. I swallowed. I looked out the window at those dark trees. There, beneath that soil, lay a secret that had waited 25 years. You don't have to look there anymore, I said. I'm here, in the passenger seat. Joliet greeted us, as always, with the smoke from factory chimneys and potholed roads. Elena's mother's house was a modest brick house with a peeling green fence at the very end of the working-class neighborhood. As we turned onto the street, the shiny black car stood out like a spaceship against the gray fabric of the neighborhood. I could see the curtains of the neighboring houses parting. Adrian parked the car in front of the house. He turned off the engine. Silence. Are you ready? He asked. No, I said honestly. But I'm getting out. I opened the door. I carefully placed my left foot on the ground. I stood up, leaning on my cane for support. At that moment, the house door opened. Elena came out onto the porch wearing her faded puffer jacket and carrying a laundry basket. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, and her face bore those familiar lines of exhaustion. He saw me. First he looked at the car, then at my clean, expensive clothes, and finally at my face. A flicker of hope appeared in his eyes for a moment, followed immediately by fear. He thought I had come to ask for money again, that I had gotten myself into trouble again. Caleb? His voice trembled in the wind. You. What's that car? Whoa. What's going on? He left the basket on the railing. Hi, Elena, I said. I tried not to let my voice crack. We need to talk, but first, I want you to meet someone. I turned to the back door and nodded. Adrian got out of the car. That was the moment time broke. Adrian came over and stood shoulder to shoulder with me. On one side, me, my lame leg, my cane, the marks of years on the streets etched on my face. On the other side, Adrian, his upright posture, his sharp suit, his confidence. But our faces, those faces were like two statues cast from the same mold, only painted by life's different brushes. The same jawline, the same eye structure, the same lines on our foreheads. Elena's hands went to her mouth. Her eyes darted from me to Adrian, not like watching a tennis match, but like witnessing a miracle or a catastrophe. Oh my God, her whisper echoed in the quiet street. This is impossible. You're identical. She stumbled backward, grabbing the railing. Caleb, who is this man? Do you have a brother? His name is Adrian, I said. And yes, I have a sister, Elena. I have a past. Just then, the door opened again. Leo burst out first. He was wearing pajamas with the Superman emblem on them. "Dad!" he shouted. He didn't see the car, Adrian, or the strangeness. He only saw his father. "Dad's here!" Maya came out behind him. Her hair was braided on both sides. I leaned my cane against the wall and opened my arms. Leo ran over and hugged my leg. I staggered slightly from the impact, but didn't fall. Maya clung to my other leg. Their pure love, warmth, scent. After the $30 alimony receipts, the cold parking lot corners, this feeling was heaven itself. I bent down and hugged them both. I buried my face in Maya's hair. "I'm here, princess," I said. "I'm here, my lion." Leo lifted his head and looked at me. Then his gaze shifted to Adrian standing beside me. The child's eyes widened. "Dad?" Leo said, then turned to me. "There are two dads." Adrian smiled and knelt down, getting down to the children's level. "Hello, Leo. Hello, Maya. I'm not a copy of your father," he said in a warm voice. "I'm your uncle. My name is Adrian." "Uncle?" Maya put her finger to her mouth. "But my dad has no one. He fell from the sky." "He does now, sweetheart," I said, tears streaming from my eyes. "We're not alone anymore." Elena came down the stairs and joined us. She was still in shock, but she could see how the children looked at this man, this stranger, with such trust. "Come inside," she said, her voice still trembling, but she had opened the door. "I'll make some tea. I imagine you have a lot to tell me." We sat around the linoleum-covered table in Elena's mother's small kitchen. Me, Adrian, and Elena. The children were in the living room, playing with the expensive tablets Adrian had bought them on the way. But I knew their ears were on us. The conversation lasted 3 hours. I put the DNA report on the table. The hospital records from Gary, Adrian's childhood photos. Elena listened, nodding. Sometimes she looked at Adrian, then turned to look at me as if trying to untangle the invisible bond between us. "So," Elena said, looking at the cold tea in her cup. "So when he ruined that construction job, when he made those decisions, it wasn't irresponsibility. You didn't know who you were. You had no roots." "Still, it was my fault," I said honestly. "My memory loss doesn't change the fact that I put the family at risk. But Elena, I was alone. I was groping my way in the dark. Now," I looked at Adrian. "Now we've turned on the light." Elena's eyes filled with tears. She reached across the table and touched my calloused hand. For the first time in years, she wasn't looking at me with anger, but with compassion. "You were always strong, Caleb. I know how you ran around construction sites with that crippled leg. It's just, you were so alone." Adrian stepped in. His voice was gentle but firm. "You're not alone anymore. Elena, we've paid off all the debts. Julian's share of the inheritance more than covers the kids' college expenses, your rent, everything." Elena flinched. "I don't want money," she said proudly. "This isn't charity," I said. "It's my children's right. And your right. You pulled me out from under that wreckage, Elena. You gave me a family." That night, when Adrian got up to return to his hotel, the children ran to the door. "Will you come back, Uncle Adrian?" Leo asked. "I promise," Adrian said. "I'll even take you to the lake this weekend, with your father." After they left, I stayed there that night, on the sofa in the living room. Elena came to me after the children fell asleep, bringing a pillow and a blanket. What name will you use? She asked. Caleb or Julian? I don't know, I said. But knowing my last name is Vance, that feels good. To me, you're still my children's father, she said, and turned off the light. Whatever your name is. That night, on that old, sagging couch, I slept much more peacefully than I ever had in the Langhams' luxurious bed. Because I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was a father. I had a brother. And I had a past. A week later, we were in Detective Shaw's office in that old brick building on the west side of Chicago. Shaw, in his mid-50s, with his short-cropped gray hair and piercing gaze reminiscent of a hawk, looked less like a man preparing for retirement and more like a soldier gearing up for battle. His office reeked of stale coffee and the heavy, hopeless smell of hundreds of unsolved cases gathering dust on the shelves. His desk was covered with mountains of paper. He flung a thick, yellowed folder in front of us. The thud it made hitting the desk heightened the tension in the room. "All right, gentlemen," Shaw said, leaning back in his chair and interlacing his fingers. His voice was rough, like sandpaper. I dug deep, and what I found will turn your stomachs." Adrian stiffened beside me. His hand was clenched into a fist, pressed against his knee. "We're listening," he said. Shaw opened the folder and pulled out an old, photocopied police report. The paper was so old, the writing was faded. October 4th, 2000, midnight. Joliet Highway, mile marker 17. He began to read. He fixed his eyes on me. An unconscious, unidentified young man was found in the ditch beside the road. Multiple fractures. Specifically, a compound fracture of the left femur and permanent damage to the kneecap. And, of course, that damn head trauma. I gripped my cane tightly. My left leg began to ache, as if remembering that night. "Who found me?" I asked, trying to suppress the tremor in my voice. "A long-haul truck driver named Calvin Hicks," Shaw said. "He passed away in 2018, but his statement is here. That night, when he slowed down because of the rain, he noticed a dark shape on the side of the road. He stopped and saw you. And most importantly, he said that while he was stopped, he saw a light-colored sedan with its headlights off speeding away from the scene." "And the police didn't pursue it?" Adrian slammed his hand on the table. "A hit and run. How could they not investigate?" "They did," Shaw said calmly, "but in the wrong direction. Interstate communication back then was like the Stone Age. By the time they took you to the hospital in Gary, Indiana, the Chicago police were looking for a body in Joliet, not a missing teenager. The files didn't match. You became a statistic, Caleb, a John Doe." Shaw pulled out another document. "Here's the real bombshell. I combed through all the insurance and theft reports filed in that area that week. And bingo. Exactly 3 days after the incident, a local respected citizen, 52-year-old Dr. Charles Victor Brenner, reported his car stolen. A 1999 beige Toyota Camry." "A doctor?" I whispered. "Yes. Senior anesthesiologist at Metropolitan General Hospital. Dr. Brenner claimed his car was stolen from in front of his house. The car was found a week later, rolled down an embankment on a secluded forest road near the state border, completely burned out. All fingerprints, all evidence, reduced to ashes." "That doesn't prove he's guilty," said Adrian, speaking with a lawyer's logic. "Listen," said Shaw, a hunter's gleam in his eyes. "The doctor's alibi seemed solid. He was on duty at the hospital that night. But I pulled the hospital records from the archives. There's an interesting detail in the logbook. Between 11:00 p.m. and 12:30 a.m., the time of the accident, Dr. Brenner left the hospital. A note was added. Emergency call. But that night, Dr. Brenner's name doesn't appear on any ambulance or emergency service in the area. A fictitious call. My stomach churned. So, I said, my breath catching. A doctor. A man sworn to save lives. Ran me over like a dog on the highway, and then left me to die? Worse, Shaw said coldly. He left you there, went home to sleep, spent 3 days planning, and then burned his car to destroy the evidence, like a cold-blooded sociopath. The air in the room grew heavy. Learning that what had stolen my 25 years, my youth, my leg, and my memory wasn't fate, knowing it was the cowardice of a respected doctor, the rage inside me was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. It was the pure, distilled hatred of a man who'd been wronged. "Where is that man?" Adrian asked. His voice was ice cold. "We're going right now. To the police, the prosecutor, the press, wherever we need to go." "You can't go," Shaw said. "Charles Brenner died 3 years ago. Lung cancer. Justice has been served in the divine way." I slumped into the chair in disappointment. "So it's over? He got away with it?" "Not exactly," said Shaw. He pulled a photograph from the bottom of the file. In the photo was a young man who resembled his father, but was more gaunt, his eyes shadowed with guilt. "This is Miles Brenner, the doctor's son. He's 39 now, lives on the South Side. And here's the interesting part. 2 years ago, after his father's death, he went to the police station. He said, 'I want to talk about an old accident.' But the officers, finding no body or complainant, dismissed his statement as time-barred. They just dismissed it as drunken ramblings and sent him away." I stood up. I no longer felt the pain in my leg. I only felt the fire inside me. "He knows," I said. "The son knows everything." "He knows," Shaw confirmed, "and I think he's tired of living with that burden on his conscience. He'll want to talk to you." Adrian stood up too. "We're going," he said. "Give us the address." "I'm coming too," said Shaw, grabbing his coat. "This is my case, and I don't close my cases." Miles Brenner's home was in one of the dilapidated apartment buildings in the south of the city, awaiting demolition under the guise of urban renewal. It was a place where the hallways reeked of urine and burnt grease and the walls were crumbling. When we reached the door, Adrian looked at me. "You don't have to do this," he said. "I can send the lawyers." "No," I said, tapping my cane hard on the floor. "His father stole my life. I'll settle the score." We knocked on the door. After a long silence, we heard the lock turn. The door opened slightly, and behind the chain, a weak, unshaven face appeared. The skin under his eyes dark purple. He looked at me, first with empty eyes. Then his eyes grew wide. They turned chalky white. He began to tremble as if he had seen the angel of death. "You," he whispered. His voice was hoarse. "You, the boy on the highway." "I'm not a child, Miles," I said. "I'm that child's wreckage, and I'm alive." Miles unlocked the chain. He opened the door wide. He was resigned. "Come in," he said, bowing his head. "I know. I've been waiting for this day for years." Miles's apartment was like a shrine to guilt. The walls were bare, the furnishings mismatched and old, as if gathered from the trash. There was a heavy, musty smell inside. But this smell came not only from dampness, but also from the decay of a secret kept hidden for years. When Miles invited us into the living room, I realized that this trembling, frail man had actually built his own prison. "The couch," he said, pointing to a worn-out sofa. He sat down on the wooden chair opposite, as if it were a defendant's chair. His eyes were fixed on my leg, the left leg I had unconsciously stretched forward. "My father was a good man," Miles began. His voice was so quiet that the rain hitting the window drowned him out. Then a bitter smile spread across his face. "Or so we all thought. The town's respected doctor, the church's benefactor, the model father. It was all a lie." "Don't tell us lies, Miles," Adrian said sharply. "Tell us about that night." Miles took a deep breath. It was as if he wanted to expel the poisonous air from his lungs. He wasn't at the hospital that night. He was on call, but he had slipped out. He had a lover in Joliet. A secret affair that had been going on for years. While my mother waited for him at home, he was living another life. That night, he had argued with his lover. She wanted to break up. My father was angry, tense, and yes, he had been drinking. Not much, but enough to slow his reflexes. I was gripping my cane with both hands. My knuckles were white. On the way back, the 17th mile curve, the rain was pouring down. The wipers weren't enough. My father entered the curve too fast. The car skidded on the water. He lost control. Miles paused, swallowed. He didn't dare look at me. He said he saw someone walking on the shoulder. He swerved at the last moment, but it hit me. I finished the sentence. My voice sounded cold, even to my own ears. "Yes," said Miles, tears streaming from his eyes. "It hit you with the front right side of the car. You rolled into the ditch." My dad stopped. He got out. "He came over to you." That was the most crucial point. It could have been an accident. Anyone could make a mistake. But what happened next? "When he got out, he checked your pulse," Miles continued. His voice was trembling. "You were alive. You were unconscious. But you were alive. Your left leg." My father was an anesthesiologist, but he knew trauma training. He saw your leg was bad, that your femur was shattered. He could have saved you. He could have put you in the car and taken you to the hospital. That damn hospital was only 15 minutes away. "Why didn't he?" Detective Shaw asked. His voice cracked like a whip. "Why did he leave you there to die?" Miles began to sob. He buried his face in his hands. "He was afraid," he said hoarsely. "If he took you to the hospital, the police would have come. They would have given him a breathalyzer test. It would have been revealed that he had left his post, where he was. His career, his reputation, his family. That perfect life would have ended. In that moment, he made a choice. He chose his own life over yours." A bomb of silence exploded in the room. That selfish calculation a doctor made between a child's life and his own comfort. My stomach clenched. 25 years of my life had been wasted for the sake of one man's reputation. "He left you there," Miles whispered. "He went home. He changed his clothes, and he went back to his post, as if nothing had happened. But that night, in that ditch, he left not only you, but his own soul. When he got cancer, in his final days, he refused the morphine. 'I need to feel the pain,' he said. 'This is my punishment.' He told me everything then." Adrian jumped to his feet. His anger was so great that the air in the room seemed to tighten. He stormed toward Miles, and I thought he was going to grab him by the collar. But then he stopped. He looked at me. There was no vengeance in his eyes, only helplessness. "What are we going to do, Julian?" Adrian said. "This man is dead. Justice is rotting in the ground. Is this scum going to get away with it?" I struggled to my feet, leaning on my cane. I put weight on my crippled leg. At that moment, I realized that leg wasn't just a source of pain. It was my survival medal. Dr. Brenner had run away in fear, but I had crawled out of that ditch. I took a step toward Miles. He raised his head. There was fear in his eyes. He was expecting me to hit him, to yell at him. "Your father stole my life," I said calmly. "He turned me into a memory-less, crippled, lonely nothing. But you know what, Miles? I built a life for myself out of that nothingness. I built it. It was destroyed. I built it again. Your father, meanwhile, rotted away inside his perfect life." "You can have everything," Miles said. "My house, my car, the little money my father left me. I'll give you everything. Just don't forgive me because I can't forgive myself." "I don't want your money," I said. "I don't want your miserable house either. I want only one thing from you." Miles waited. "The truth," I said. "Tomorrow morning I'll bring a reporter from the Chicago Tribune here. You'll face the camera. You'll tell everyone what your father did, how that respected doctor turned into a monster on that rainy night. People will know what happened to that nameless child by the highway, and people will see the darkness beneath that white coat." "I'll do it," Miles said without hesitation. "I swear I'll do it." "And you," I said, turning to Detective Shaw, "you can close the case. The perpetrator has been found. Justice. Justice was served not in the courtroom, but in this room." When we left the building, the rain had stopped. In the sky, a faint moonlight filtered through the clouds. I breathed in the clean, cold air. I felt the invisible weight on my shoulders lift. I had found the answer to that "why me" question I had carried for 25 years. The answer was ugly but clear. "Are you okay?" Adrian asked, slipping his arm through mine. I looked at Miles's window, at that faint light. Inside was a lonely man living with his father's sin. I, on the other hand, was free, with my brother by my side. "I'm fine, Adrian," I said, and for the first time, I truly believed it. "Let's go home. The kids will wake us up early tomorrow to go to the lake." As we got into the car, I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. There was no longer a frightened victim there, but Julian Vance, proudly bearing his wounds. I couldn't change the past, but the steering wheel of the future was now in my hands. The seasons changed. Chicago's bone-chilling wind gave way to a warm, humid breeze blowing in from Lake Michigan. But it wasn't just the weather that changed. The season in the eyes of the man I saw in the mirror had changed too. Gone was that timid, survival-driven winter look. In its place was a calmer, more confident summer look. The courts, the bureaucracy, those endless lines of signatures, it all faded into a blurry memory. The moment the judge banged his gavel on the table and declared, "Julian Vance is officially alive again," the last weight on my shoulders lifted. I was no longer legally dead. I was no longer a ghost. Miles Brenner kept his word. The interview he gave to the newspaper shook the city. The headline, "The Doctor's Secret," exposed not only one family's tragedy, but also how the system swallows its invisible people. Miles didn't go to prison. The statute of limitations saved him from behind bars. But he received a life sentence in the public conscience. And strangely, this confession also set him free. In a letter he wrote to me last week, He said he had stepped out of his father's shadow for the first time. I didn't forgive him, but I stopped hating him. Hate was too heavy a burden to carry, and I already had a cane to lean on. Mr. Julian, I snapped out of my thoughts. Standing before me was a young woman holding crumpled papers. Her eyes were red, her coat dirty. We were in the waiting room of our new South Side Center, the Bridge. Yes, I said, rising from my desk. I leaned on my cane, but I no longer felt the need to hide it. It was part of me. I'm Julian. How can I help you? They said you could help me, the woman said timidly. I lost my husband, I was kicked out of my home, and I have no ID. I have nothing. I smiled. I knew that emptiness, that nothingness, all too well. You're in the right place, I said. No one is nobody here. Come, let's get you some tea first, then we'll take care of those papers. The Bridge was founded with Adrian's funding and my vision. Detective Shaw joined us as the security and investigation director. Instead of retiring to go fishing, he chose to find missing people and bring them back into the system. This was not just a shelter, but a rehabilitation center. We provided legal support, medical assistance, and most importantly, the need to be seen. My story was living proof for everyone who came here. There was a way out, even from the deepest pit. Adrian stopped by in the late afternoon. Instead of his usual suit, which now seemed like armor, he wore a more comfortable linen shirt. Are you ready? He asked. The kids are getting impatient. Leo swore he wouldn't light the grill without you. I'm coming, I said, grabbing my jacket. We drove to that old, peaceful lake house north of the city. The house my father, I could call him that now, had bought 25 years ago, and Adrian couldn't bring himself to sell. In the garden, Elena was pushing Maya on the swing. Leo, grill tongs in hand, was standing by the barbecue, getting tips from Adrian. I got out of the car. The smell of the grass, the sound of the lake, and my children's laughter. This scene was my life. Stolen 25 years ago on the side of the highway. And now, I had it back, with interest. Elena came over to me. Her hair was blowing in the wind. The worried lines on her face had disappeared, replaced by a peaceful smile. You're tired, he said, taking my hand. It's a good kind of tired, I said. The tiredness that comes from feeling useful. After dinner, I walked to the pier as the sun set. My left leg ached a little at the end of the day. But thanks to the new physical therapy and custom-made orthopedic supports Adrian had arranged, the pain had become a manageable ache. I couldn't run like I used to, but I could walk with steady steps. Adrian came up beside me. I'm thinking, he said, looking at the lake. If I hadn't gotten into that taxi that morning, if it hadn't rained, if you hadn't looked in the rearview mirror, butterfly effect, I said. Or fate. Call it what you will. I'm lucky to have found you, brother, Adrian said. His voice trembled. I spent 25 years searching for you, and now you're standing right here beside me. Me too, I said, for getting me out of that dark parking lot, for giving me back not just my name, but my dignity. When night fell, after everyone had gone to sleep, I went out onto the balcony. Below, 2 cars were parked on the driveway. Adrian's luxury SUV and my old Civic, which I couldn't bear to part with, completely repaired and repainted. That car was my past. It was my pain, my refuge. I couldn't sell it because it reminded me every day where I came from. I took out my phone. I looked at the messages on the Bridge social media account. One caught my attention. It was from the woman we helped today. Thank you, Mr. Julian. Tonight, for the first time in 3 months, I will sleep without fear. My eyes filled with tears. I looked up at the sky. I imagined my mom and dad watching us from somewhere among the stars. The sound of my mother's piano rang in my ears. I took that old black and white photo out of my back pocket. 2 children standing on the pier. One smiling with his guitar, the other looking at his brother with admiration. I whispered to that child, that little Julian, "Don't worry, son. The road will be a little bumpy. You'll fall a lot. You'll get hurt a lot. But in the end, you'll come home. And when you do, your story will light the way not just for you, but for others too." Sometimes life is understood by looking in the rearview mirror, but it's only lived by looking through the windshield. I shifted into gear. The road was clear, and in the passenger seat, it was no longer fear that sat there, but hope. I'm truly happy to be here and to be able to share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm very curious to know where all of you, those wonderful people, are joining from. With love and respect.